Hello, and welcome to another episode of Purlfect Pairings. My name is Gayanne, she, her.
And my name's Nicole, and my pronouns are she and her. And we'd like to start this episode by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, both of which we're filming today, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And very shortly, we're going to take you to the Ballarat region, where the traditional owners are the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people. We wish to pay our respects to elders past and present. We'd also like to acknowledge the often fraught relationship between Indigenous land rights and the Australian farming industry, and recognise the contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the Fibre arts community over the millennia. So today,
this is so exciting. I know I say this, I feel like I say this every episode.
Life is exciting when we're doing Purlfect Pairings,
right? It is. So we've had a bit of a road trip today out to Ballarat, where we are visiting Nick and Isabel Renters, who are the proprietors of the Great Ocean Road Woollen Mill.
So I think we probably need to just explain that a little bit, because for those that are familiar with Australia, Great Ocean Road is in quite a different area to Ballarat. So Great Ocean Road, maybe our overseas viewers might be a little bit more familiar with. It's a really well-known tourist destination. Ballarat, historically in that region, was part of originally the Gold Rush. So it has a lot of significant Gold Rush history.
Oh, beautiful architecture from the Gold Rush era as well.
So Great Ocean Road Woollen Mill began on the Great Ocean Road in that area. And Nick and Isabel have now moved. They've retained the name of the business, which was really important in terms of the reputation that they've built, which is quite significant. And they've now recently purchased some land just outside of Ballarat, where they're raising their alpacas. They're running their alpaca farm, and which is really planning to go off grid,
which is unbelievable from a sustainability perspective, not only just for living but for their yarn manufacturing. So we're really looking forward to seeing that. And
I think we'll need to organize another road trip once they're up and running. So
definitely
today, when we went to visit them, we actually went to like an industrial estate, which is where they currently have their mill equipment. Isabel actually told a really lovely story. So that they're a little bit in all places at the moment. They've got their small sort of storage area where they've got all their mill equipment, which is where they're doing their production at the moment. Because their property is still being set up, they're renting in Ballarat, and then they've got their alpacas on their property, on their new land. But one of them is, how old did she? 21 years old. 21 years old. Alpacas typically live to about 20 years old.
Yeah.
So this old fellow is really dear to them. They've had him for about 7 or 8 years. And even though I guess a lot of farmers would maybe not continue to sustain an animal like that, they go out there every day to hand feed him because he doesn't have teeth, and he's still quite happy, but he does need special food. So I think that's indicative of the kind of people that Nick and Isabel are, and I think
the care. I think the care that they show, not only their animals but also their business, in terms of some of the practices that you'll see we've touched upon. A lot of their ethos around sustainability and support of local industry. So we love that.
I reckon maybe we should
cut to it. Nick, Isabel, thank you so much for joining us today, and for showing us your space here. How's it all going with setting up the mill?
Yeah, it's a bit of a work in progress. We're partway set up. We've had a few planning hiccups, and issues along the way, but yeah, we've been in this space now for 12 months, and we're just in the process of building eventually building a second shed, which will allow us to set up a bit more fully. At the moment, it's very cramped and not everything is functional, unfortunately.
So you started in 2015, is that right?
Yeah.
Now, what did you do before then, and then what drove you in terms of wanting to start up a mill?
So I used to work in IT as a project manager, and then when I came to Australia, I worked for a local credit union as a risk manager. Yeah, and then I think it must have been 2013, I decided, we had bought the property at that point, we bought it in 2011. In 13, I decided I wanted a tree change and get out of corporate world. So we started looking at different options what to do on the farm basically, and start a bit of veggie growing and so forth. But when we first got our land, we needed to do something in terms of livestock. We had 20 acres. We started with 2 alpacas, and alpacas need to get shorn. So yeah, every year, and we really desperately wanted to do something with their fibres. We started investigating a bit what to do and who was around, and there seemed to be a lot of long waiting lists with the then current mills around, or the mills which were around then. So we started to look into it really, in terms of maybe, there could be one option for us to do.
We're not from a fibre background.
At all.
We had no idea when we started. I've done sales, carpet laying, lawn mowing business and everything. Yeah, it was really just the fact we didn't want to waste our own fibre, and just thought there must be other people like us who were growing beautiful alpaca fibre, and Australia grows some of the best alpaca fibre in the world. We export it over to Peru for processing that, and thought, well, what must be some sort of a market there for that. So yeah,
so that's what really started us. So we originally started with the idea of doing commission work, and figured very quickly, we learned that wasn't working for us from a cash flow perspective and so forth.
So commission work being
spinning for others basically in the alpaca world. So yeah, and then sort of around about that same time, so probably a year later, 2014, no, it might have been a bit later, or just after we actually started, we met a lady who was growing superfine merino, and she also is a Surrey breeder, the longer locked alpacas.
Yes.
So, and she was quite local to us, and she introduced us to superfine. So, which then took us into that whole world of actually wool processing.
She had some of the connections, like she knew Jim Robinson really well, and she was growing her own superfine merino at the time, and sort of said, oh, why don't we buy one of her bales
and give it a go.
Give it a go.
So we did.
And around the same time as well, we also met Tom from Tandy and his family, who were about an hour down the road, and they gave us a little bit of their pole work to play with as well.
Yes.
And one of the things I found amazing was, unlike alpaca, which was quite temperamental machines, when you set up the wool to spin, you can actually stop it, change all the buttons and everything else, and then press start again, and it keeps on going.
It actually works better.
It's that.
So it's a bit easier to process.
Yes.
It was at that stage, yeah, and then we get funky and then it gets hard again. But then in the early days, we thought, wow, this stuff actually works really, really well, and there's a lot less swearing than what the alpaca was. So we thought maybe there's something in wool there. So
for those of you who don't know who Jim Robinson is, I think you should know who he is. He's the head of EP Robinson's, which is a scouring plant in Geelong. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the only place in Victoria where you can currently have wool scoured commercially.
Yes, it's the only one that does it for outside people,
Yeah, there are only 2, I think, left in Australia, full stop.
3, I think.
3.
Yeah.
So Jim, there's one in South Australia, and
there's another one, I think, at Laverton that doesn't do anything for individual customers.
Yeah. And he's a top-notch bloke.
Yeah.
he is, yeah.
And his family's been doing it for over 100 years, so
Yeah, so they've been around. So
we really hope to be able to interview Jim later on. So Jim, if you're watching, you'll get my call soon. One of the reasons that Nicole and I love your yarn is your ethos and what you bring in terms of sustainability to the industry. What are your top 3 sustainability practices and why are they so important?
You go.
Hand pass. Okay, so one of the big things for us is local. So all of the fibres that we source, except for the linen in our Summer Fiesta range, everything else is from Australia. And we can't source that in Australia because it's not made here for fibre processing. And with that, everything is Victorian, except for our cotton, which comes from Queensland. And with everything, it's basically within a 100-kilometre radius of where we are. So we are really about that whole local and keeping it local. We don't use any non-natural fibres in our yarns. So in that regard, they're fully biodegradable. They will break down, they can be shredded, they can be reused, they can be put in the compost. So in that regard, we're trying to do that as well. And I think also when we do use outside sources that we use, such as Jim Robinson for scouring or for Geelong Textiles for dyeing, that they're companies that meet Australian EPA regulations, that they meet the standards for producing stuff in Australia. We know what happens to the fibre, we know it's our fibre coming back, those sorts of things. So
there's guarantees about the I suppose the conditions for the people who are working on the products.
Yeah, exactly. So we know that Geelong Dyeing, for example, have been working through trying to get their have been ECA approved or looking at that. We know that Jim Robinson's, there's a strong union background there, so there's a lot of safeguards. They have EPA inspections, so we know that they have to do things by the book. And that's really important for us. So we're supporting other local businesses in the wool manufacturing trade, but also it is about that traceability and knowing what happens to the fibre that we then turn into yarns. And when people buy our yarns, like you guys, you're buying something that's authentic. Sometimes it comes with grass seeds.
That's another reason for that.
That's better for the world because to get rid of the grass seeds, we can either go through a combing process with Cashmere Connections, or you get it carbonised. And carbonising is a horrible process where they...
Is it an enzyme, some kind of enzyme wash?
Acid, we believe, that breaks down the fibre, stains the fibre yellow, and then they have to bathe it in bleach to get it back to white.
But no VM.
So
okay.
We'll send you VM.
I'll take the errant grass seed here and there.
Oh, exactly. And by the time it goes through the process, there's not much there, and it usually falls out pretty quickly while you're knitting it or when you first wash it. So.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, so our alpaca fibre is washed in rainwater. And
we do that ourselves.
We do that ourselves on our old farm, and our new setup will be exactly the same. That actually goes into the paddock, the grey water, so we don't want anything poisonous going down the drains for obvious reasons. The new farm is also going to, the old farm as well was on solar. We're going on solar out there as well. We're actually going off grid.
We've just had a couple of acronyms, right? And probably our shared corporate background would have us understanding those things. But just for people watching, when we say VM, what are we referring to? Yeah,
so certainly vegetable matter. So it's things like grass seeds or little birds or whatever else that these are animals that live in a paddock 12 months of the year, whether it's alpaca, sheep or goats or whatever. So so they sometimes when you shear them, you have a little bit of the vegetable matter, grass seeds, whatever stuck to them. So that's what comes through.
Yeah, and it just gets stuck in the fleece and it has to be taken out as part of the processing.
Exactly, yeah. So it breaks down throughout the process, whether it gets shattered or whether it gets washed out, or sometimes pick it out by hand. It's a very tactile, hands-on sort of thing.
Another acronym that has come up is EPA. For our viewers who don't know what that is, can you explain that?
So the EPA is the Environmental Protection Authority here in Australia. They go much further than just, of course, scouring and wool. The recent controversy around soft plastic bags, for example, you know, that's what they investigate. But from our perspective, they make sure that all the companies we work with, you don't use chemicals which are harmful to the environment, basically, or too harmful, or can't be broken down, or what's the word, sustainably removed, I guess, and secured. So
yeah, they set the standards for
Basically.
how companies need to operate
yes,
for the protection of the environment, whether
Yeah.
it's, like you said, the plastic bag recycling, or the logging as well. They have had that recent
Yeah.
logging issue, or things like the Mary Creek back up in Melbourne, where we are, when it gets all fuzzy and foamy.
Who knows what's being released?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the last acronym, well, it might not be the last acronym today, but anyway, is ECA. Now, that's one that until I went to your website, I wasn't really that familiar with. So maybe some other people could use an explanation about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the ECA stands for Ethical Clothing Australia. It's a organisation basically for the textile industry, or the textile world, to ensure safe working conditions, correct pay, those sorts of things, workers' entitlements. Basically, it's a accredited system that's run by the unions, and yeah, they're rolling it out to people who want to sign up voluntarily to ensure that they meet workplace health and safety rules, that they pay the right amounts to people.
industry wages.
Yeah, and that they've got the power to come in and to audit businesses every year to make sure they're meeting the standards that are set down by the Fair Work Ombudsman and those sorts of things.
Now, you have this accreditation.
Yes, we do.
What was involved in...
For both.
Yeah, so for our yarn manufacturing, so we're actually the only mill in Australia that is certified by ECA, and also for our knitwear, our Zalba range of scarves and beanies and that sort of stuff, that's also certified. So basically it involves a yearly inspection. So they'll come and check out the site, make sure it's actually a safe site, make sure that we have fire extinguishers that are up to date and working, that we have emergency exits available. When we've employed people, that we actually pay them the correct rates, so that when we're looking at employing somebody, we'll get in touch with them and they'll say, okay, this is the pay rate for that qualifications that that person has. And yeah, we have to meet those standards and provide them with all the evidence that we pay superannuation, that we pay their wages when we say we're going to pay, those sorts of things. But yeah, they'll come through, they'll do a bit of a safety inspection of all the equipment and everything else and make sure that we're doing the right thing. Yeah, and it's a bit sad that we're the only mill certified. But anyway, we're very proud of it. We're very proud to actually have that certification.
As should be.
Yeah, and it makes our knitwear actually the only knitwear in Australia being 100% Australian or certified by ethical clothing, because our yarns are too. So even with other companies who do make things here, the materials aren't necessarily certified.
I am currently knitting with your Labella 10 ply, right, which is an alpaca merino blend. And I know that your yarns, you have a variety of different materials that you blend with the alpaca. So linen, I think you've done a cotton wool before. Yep. How do you decide what blends to make, and how do you source those fibers?
So I guess with our Labella range, especially the greys, the yarn, the colour actually determines the blend. So the light grey uses black fibre, 10% of black fibre and white merino, so you get a light grey. The medium, a bit more black, so you get a medium. So that's what that it's determined by. In order to keep the drape with our natural white, we do the 20% alpaca with the white merino as well, to just make sure that the drape is exactly the same basically as in the other two.
And with the other fibres, it's been a little bit of a mixture of things. Some people just say, have you ever tried this? Mm-hmm. And so find us some, we'll give it a go. Others have been some deliberate choices. Australia's a really warm country. Linen is a summer fibre, so let's try to find some linen and work out a way where we can blend it in a yarn that works through the process, but also feels good at the end for people to actually use. So that's, it's a bit of a mixture of things.
Because linen can be a bit harsh sometimes on the hands, can't it, as a hand knitter?
Yeah, and linen, surprisingly, is actually a lot like wool. It comes in different grades. So
does cotton.
Yeah, and there's coarser grades. There's grades that would be better suited for your fine linen clothing that you'll find in department stores or whatever else. So so been a little bit of research and development into those sorts of things. But our linen we have to import from Europe. They've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. Incredibly sustainable practice as well, which is fantastic as well. The cotton, somebody literally said, have you ever tried cotton before? And so find me some, give it a go. Ended up swearing a lot, but managed to create 100% cotton yarn. I asked mini mills down the track, said when we saw them next, cotton's really hard to spin. They said, you can't spin cotton on our system, it's just not designed for that. So I showed them my cone and they said, oh wow, okay. Because we don't know anything, we didn't know what we were doing, we just give it a go and make it work in the end.
I have to say, I almost cried when I missed out on the cotton merino. I did.
It'll come back, but I'd like to just sort of add to that quickly for those who don't know. So we are a woolen mill. There are actually mills around the world for cotton. So they're cotton spinning mills. So China, for example, all of our clothing basically, the yarn will have been spun on cotton spinning mills. Hence that as a woolen mill, you're not really supposed to be able to spin cotton.
Yeah, it comes
so
down
I just
to
thought
from that sort of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, now that we're on this topic, how do you spin? I suppose, is it woolen spun or worsted spun? So those are kind of the two options, I think, for.
So we're somewhere in the middle, yeah. So we call ourselves a woolen mill. Technically, we're a semi-worsted fibre processing plant, but that doesn't sound very good in the marketing.
Let's back up a step. How does that choice, I suppose, impact how the wool comes out at the end, or how the yarn comes out at the end?
Yeah, so a worsted process, basically the fibre will get carded. It'll then go through a top making comb, which basically removes a lot of the air out of the fibre, makes the fibre a lot denser, and straightens the fibre quite a lot as well. So in a worsted yarn, you don't get much of a blooming effect, if that makes sense. So when you knit our yarns, once they relax and you finish, it sort of relaxes into the air spaces between the stitches.
Yes.
Whereas a worsted yarn won't do that so much. And then you've got a woolen mill, which is like Nundle up in New South Wales, and they basically spin directly from their card. So they don't have what we've got as a pin drafter between our card and the spinner. They don't have that, and we don't have a comb. So comb makes us worsted. We're pin drafters, so we're a semi-worsted, so we're almost there but not quite. And then woolen spun is a step before that. Does that make sense?
The other thing I just wanted to add around the worsted, the way I always remember it. So all of our clothing will have been made from yarn, so not even hand knitted, like everything we wear, of course. And worsted yarns are predominantly used in fabric. So that's sort of how, when you then think about what you wear, anything from jeans to anything else, how tight those fibers really are, and in comparison to any woolen products. So that's how I remember that worsted really, a lot of the times, is more for your fabrics.
And just to confuse the world a little bit more, we do actually have some worsted yarns that we are spinning from comb tops. From Trish at Cashmere Connections. But yeah, that has its own challenges. But yes, so we actually have some worsted yarns, and you'll see that our 5-ply is a 3-stranded worsted yarn. It almost looks skinnier than our 4-ply. Because
it's worsted.
It's worsted. It's denser.
Yeah.
Just dense.
Yeah. So it's, yeah. So the white one here is a worsted top, and if you can see, if I can separate that a little bit, you'll see there's quite a lot of alignment of the fibres. They're going very much straight up and down, and if you give it a little bit of a tug, there's not a lot of spring back. Whereas if you have a look at the rose grey, you'll see the fibres are a lot more crossed over. There's a lot more, there's some alignment, but not as much. And if you give it a little bit of a tug, it wants to bounce back to where it was.
So it's much springier.
Yes.
Right.
Even though this is alpaca, it just not as springy even as wool.
Yeah, right. And so is that something that people are transparent about in terms of the way that they market things? Or is that just something as a knitter that you need to be?
I don't know. I've never really heard anybody explain it to me. I've read up on this, and then our personal experience, I guess, just taught us what we've learned. From a knitting perspective, does it make a difference? I guess it can do when you knit when you think about your end product and what your yarn should look, what your garment should look like. So I can show you a couple of mine when some of our yarns, once you wash them, they become quite snuggly.
And they bloom a lot more, so you'll lose a bit of that stitch definition to some extent. Whereas with the worsted spun, it will really hold that stitch definition a lot more.
But I can confuse it more too, because a lot of our yarns, given the amount of twist Nick puts into it, will hold the stitch definition. So there should not be a concern that you can't see the stitch definition in any of our yarns, once you've worked with that. But principally, I guess more, that's just something to be aware of. Or if you ever wonder why your garment doesn't, it looks slightly different, it could be to do with the spinning side of things.
Now, this is probably the most burning question that I have for you today, and it's this. What's it like working all day, every day with your partner?
Ladies first.
Fine, actually. Nick and I both have very distinctive roles. It sort of started right from the start. When we first got the equipment, I think we both kind of assumed that I was going to be doing the spinning, and certainly in the first few years, I was always the one getting the questions from everybody. How are you finding spinning? But it's a personality thing for us both. That basically Nick ended up doing the spinning and the processing side. It's around that I don't deal well with. I'm not overly patient, and when things don't work the way I'd like them to, I need to take a break. Nick isn't patient either, but he'll just battle on. He's not going to get beaten by a machine. It's just as simple as that. So that's sort of the start of it, I guess. And that from there it just developed. So I hand knit. I learned it as a little girl, as I think a lot of us do. And getting the mill meant I had to try the yarns out, for myself to see how they work, but also in order to make sure that we actually create a balanced yarn. So from a professional perspective, if it's not a balanced yarn, then you get your, what's the word?
Trapezoid sort of a shape.
And you do a square. So it's all to do with that. So that's sort of what started that. yeah, and it just sort of developed from there. So I do the social media side. Nick sort of feels that he's the one who does the spinning and works a lot in there, and yeah. So we don't really spend that much time together, but we do. Both sides, both ends of the mill, basically. So
yeah, I think it's just worked out really, really well that our personalities, our skills that we've both brought to this, I guess, just work. So
complemented each other.
Sometimes the demands for a certain type of yarn, or I need more of this, or have you tried to make this yet? Create some discussions. But generally, it's just really, it's actually really nice to work with your partner when you're creating these sorts of things. I feel very creative by making the yarns. I think Isabel feels very creative with this end of things. And then we get to go to events together most of the time, and meet you guys creating stuff with the stuff that we've created, which is amazing. So yeah, it just works really well. After 7 or 8 years, 8 years now, we're still doing it. We're still married. It's great.
Nick's gone off to take care of some things in the mill, and I'm here with Isabel to talk all things knitting. The first question I want to ask you is about the designers that you work with. So if you search Great Ocean Road yarn on Ravelry, you come up with some pretty heavy hitting names, like Isabell Kraemer and Yamagara.
Mm-hmm.
Other than them, what designers do you work with?
So I know Thea Coleman's done. She created a cardigan in our yarns, the Shandy cardigan. She used our yarn, which was she bought off Happy Go Knitting, Helene, who is an indie dyer in New Zealand, and and sort of the connection there was actually by Helene rather than me approaching Thea, but it's a lovely cardigan, I have to say.
It is. It's got beautiful stitch definition.
It does.
That we were talking about before.
And I actually made it in one of our yarns. I can show that to you if you like. Libby Jonson, Libby Jonson, truly miracle. Forgot to tell you about her before, but Libby's done a beanie in our yarn. Noriko. She did a beautiful shawl called Asami shawl.
That's gorgeous.
It is amazing, absolutely amazing. So she's done that one, and Erimit, I think she's about to do a shawl, I believe, too.
Do we know what she's using?
She's
one a stockpile.
Yeah, I believe she's using the Summer Fiesta. So she's done a couple of different. I saw online a couple of different sort of tests in it. So
and I love that with Yamagara and Noriko and Eri. I just love that aesthetic as well. So and with Libby. That her pattern would certainly be qualifying you for the 2023 Love Locale that's going on currently as well. Mm-hmm. So how do those relationships start with the designers? Do they approach you, or is it something where you say, wow, I really like that designer, I think they could make something gorgeous with our wool? How does that work?
So I guess a mixture, to be honest. So Isabell Kraemer, years ago, this goes back now, probably 17, so at least 5 years ago, I think I approached Isabel at that time, and then shortly afterwards, being German as well, we actually met, and we've sort of ended up meeting on a couple of occasions, and Isabel created, you might know about the Purl Code sweater in our yarn. So the Purl Code sweater is a top-down design, with the idea being that that you write your own story. At the end of the pattern, you've basically got the alphabet in a Morse code, using purl stitches and knit stitches. So you come up with your own story. You can knit into the jumper.
So if you have like a mantra word that's meaningful for you, you could just spell it out.
Yeah. So the one you're holding, the white one, it's got all my animal names we've ever had on the farm on it. The grey one, for example, it's used to do a lot of travelling before COVID and everything else. So it's got all the cities and countries I've ever visited, basically. So you can create anything you like, and it makes every jumper unique.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Basically.
So you could do like your children's names, if you have kids, or anything really.
We've had a couple of quite very adverse of examples given. We've met one lady recently who felt quite strongly about Trump and decided to air her opinion in her Purl Code. Then at the same time, we were at an event actually, another lady approached Nick, and her dad recently had passed away, and so her whole jumper was about her father. So, you know, it's
that's beautiful. It's a really beautiful story, because so many people do knitting because of that mindfulness, almost therapeutic component. It just takes it to another level.
Yeah, it really does. So. Yeah, and then coming back to your question, so Isabel really liked working with our yarns, and then ended up sending her some more yarn, and she created the Topolino sweater in our 4-ply.
That's beautiful as well.
So I don't know if you can see, it's got a little bit of lace work at the bottom, and then she also did the DAA cardigan in the unique, in the one color version. So she's done that particular cardigan in either a stripy one or in a one unique color, and she's done that in our yarn too. So yeah, so I guess the initial contact there was for me. Bernice found us traveling. Bernice from Yamagara came to visit us after she heard about us from one of our customers. She and her husband, or her family, her daughter as well, came over to Australia. Bernice has got quite an affiliation, I guess, with Australia. They came over for their honeymoon, which is where it's actually her latest design in our yarn. It's not her latest, but this little top comes in. It's called Take the Weather. It's done in our Summer Fiesta. So she calls it Take the Weather because when they got married, when they came here for their honeymoon, Take the Weather with You was in the charts. So that's where the story there comes. And she's also done a lovely cardigan called Nichi Nichi.
That's on my list.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so I guess we were fortunate that she came to find us. And similar, Noriko, discovered online that she was using our yarn, so she tagged us, and you know that sort of happened a couple of times too.
That's serendipity, right? Because it's clearly word of mouth somehow. The name is getting out there.
Yeah.
To these really influential designers.
Yeah, and my problem is I don't have enough time to make every one of their designs, so I already try very hard to keep up. But yeah, it's only that many hours in a day.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I'm using those hours for knitting.
Yeah, me too. And then the other one, of course, is Shelley. So going into the crocheting world. So Shelley we met a few years ago at an event at Tandy. That's the first time we met Shelley, and Shelley lives in Portland, so where we used to be, it's comparatively close-ish.
Southwest Victoria, for those of you who don't know where Portland, Victoria is.
And so Shelley, first of all, and this goes back a few years now as well, created the Killarney cross blanket. So with her squares, so this particular one is made out of straight alpaca, and given our current situation, we're still waiting to wash enough to make alpaca yarn.
It's so soft. I really wish computer screens had like some tactile component to it, so you could feel this. I know I say that often, but it's really true. That's gorgeous. And is that all natural colors?
That's all natural.
So no dye in that at all?
No, none at all. And then for this one, so she actually didn't design this pattern. It's her Dotty Spotty. Didn't design the pattern using our yarns, but she made it using our labella Yeah, our labella 8 ply in the widest, then natural white, and then yellow and blue, of course, has been dyed. So
It's fabulous.
gorgeous, isn't it?
Isabel, let's talk through the range. So
Sure.
what is this squishy goodness that I've got in my hands here?
So our most known yarn, I guess, is our labella range, which is an alpaca merino blend. The greys are natural in color using black alpaca in a variety of percentages, and the white is 20% alpaca and merino to keep the drape. We also do this in a colored version, but that's certainly our most popular. So that's sort of one of the examples, the mustard.
It takes dye beautifully. Can because these are all natural, could
Yep.
these be hand dyed as well?
Certainly, and with the different bases, it'll probably give you quite an interesting different effect. I haven't tried them out myself, but
I wonder if you could do a fade with that. Right?
Potentially,
Say you were gonna
yeah,
just
of
use
course.
one color
Yeah.
across all three. That would make a really interesting fade.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, great idea.
So in addition to the labella, what
Yeah.
else do you have?
So we also have our Summer
one, yeah.
Fiesta, which is becoming really, really popular now. And you will have seen Yamagara's design in that too. So that's a linen merino blend, 30% linen and 70% merino. And we do it in the natural color as well as in several dyed colors, basically.
Now it has a beautiful kind of heathered appearance.
Yeah, that's the linen, and it's really, really fascinating. So I'll show you an example of this. This is straight merino, so 100% merino,
Feels beautiful.
and it's the same. It was dyed at the same time as
Is that one?
that one.
Look at the difference in that color.
Hugely different. So if you're interested into hand dyeing, it becomes fascinating in terms of what the linen or the different fibers.
So the linen almost looks like it doesn't pick up that color.
Yes, so cellulose,
plant-based material.
basically doesn't take on linen, the dye as much as, or it takes it on differently, I believe, to animal fibers. So.
Yeah.
So there are our two major ones. You're holding the merino at the moment, so we're looking actually at the range to be released later on this year, possibly one of the next yarn shows we're going to in a variety of colors, to just for that little bit of pop.
We'll be looking forward to that
Yeah.
for sure.
And then once we're set up, we'll do straight alpaca again too. So we still have a little bit left of the alpaca, but because we can't wash at the moment. Yeah, so that's pretty much our sort of range we have.
So what's next? Are there any new yarns coming up that we should be getting excited about? I have a feeling there are.
So we're going to, and I believe you know that already, that yarn, we're going to remake our cotton merino blend.
Yes.
Later
no more
on this
tears.
year. So that's certainly going to be coming. We're also looking, for those of you who know the Eva yarn we have, sorry, that's a bit of my knit, but the color you might recognize, the Polworth we used, Tom's Polworth from Tandy we used. We've been talking to Tom, and given that Eva is no more from a fibre perspective, we're looking to do something different using some of his coloured flock.
So for those of you who don't know who Tom is from Tarni, you can check out our episode where we interview him and learn more about Tarni and the homestead and the setup that they have in episode 4. And Eva is was, I suppose, I know. I don't like talking about her in the past tense.
I know.
But is a Polworth alpaca,
Surrey alpaca.
Surrey alpaca blend. So the Surrey alpaca has drape. So I watched Nick's Instagram live, and you can go back and watch that as well on Instagram, where Nick talks a lot about the different uses for the different yarns.
Yeah.
and how Surrey alpaca has an incredible drape.
Yeah.
And that's really evident in what this garment that you're knitting. So tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I love Eva, and I'm very disappointed, I think, as many of you are too, who've ever worked with Eva, that we can't remake it. But basically, at the moment, I'm in the middle. It looks very messy,
gonna hold
but need a bit of help. But I'm in the middle of knitting one of Kate Davis's cardigans.
This is a beautiful lace panel in the front. That's
Yes.
just gorgeous.
Yeah, and what I really like about this particular yarn is the drape, of course, but also the other thing, Surrey brings even more luster and shine into a yarn. We quite often use Surrey as a replacement for silk. Again, talking about sustainability, we feel that the way silk is harvested, don't really like it, whereas alpaca need to be shorn every year, so we use their fibre instead of silk. But yeah, so that's Eva, and that's what's coming. So another collaborative yarn with Tali we're looking at, which should be very exciting.
Yep. Do you have anything else on your needles that you can share?
I do, because as we all have, I've got a bit of a work in progress list. I've just started to, it's only very small at the moment.
That's okay. It counts as a whip.
It is, and it's going to be a big one. It's one of Isabell Kraemer's shawls. It's Malibu, basically.
Now, are you doing it in, so I've seen 3 color versions or 2 color versions. What are you doing?
I think I'm going to do it in a 4-color version. I think I'm going to, been thinking a bit about that. The design has the stripes, but instead of using the row of stripes, I don't know, I'm sort of thinking about using that block as using one solid color, but with one stripe in the middle, which is in green, and then our burnt orange highlighting the green on the other side.
Oh, sounds beautiful.
That's why I'm changing my mind all the time at the moment, but this is what I'm working on at the moment.
But that's the beautiful thing, right, about knitting, is that you can express yourself creatively,
Yes.
number one. And number two, if you don't like the orange with the green, you can take it out. You can put a new color in.
Yeah. And I've also got something very exciting. I've decided yesterday on, but I haven't got anything to show for it, and it's going to take me a while. My mother knitted me a cardigan when I was in my teens, and I've got the book. It's a really old book, old enough for the yarn. Doesn't exist anymore. I cannot find any information on it whatsoever, but I want that cardigan again, so I'm gonna recreate that one. So I've started thinking how I'm going to do that.
Probably might have to start with a gauge swatch, which is something that we lament almost every episode.
Of course.
But I think with that type of thing where the yarn's not available at all, it's just going to be a necessary evil.
Of course. And you know, I usually do anyway, and because I like to use our yarns, of course, for the different designs at the best of times. So yeah, but it's going to be interesting, possibly a little bit challenging. It's very lacy. It's a very lacy cardigan, so that's coming at some point.
I'll be looking forward to seeing it maybe at Bendigo.
Possibly. I should be able to at least show you something. And,
No pressure.
and it might just be the little swatches of the different little snippets. I'll show you something at Bendigo, yes.
Isabel, our podcast is called Purlfect Pairings for a number of reasons, but one of them is that we like to enjoy beverages while we craft, whether that be a tea or, wine or a cocktail. So I've got to ask you, do you have a favorite beverage that you like to have when you craft?
Yes, I do. It's not super exciting. It's actually herbal teas. It just helps me because I tend to do quite a bit of lace work. Otherwise I get some very interesting patterns going, and I only have to go back and yes.
So I'm laughing because I'm thinking of a time when I was doing some lace knitting and my husband made me a Negroni. It did not go very well that evening. Is there a particular brand or flavor of herbal tea that you lean to?
We tend to drink quite a bit of peppermint tea actually. Peppermint and chamomile. So nothing too fancy really, but I enjoy those. And Nick is not allowed to drink in the mill because of the heavy or the machine work.
No, maybe we'll get him a coffee.
A coffee, or tea, but it's more for coffee person really. Certainly during the day.
Isabel, Nick, thank you so much for having us today and for sharing your practices, your sustainability ethos. We've really had a wonderful time. How do our viewers get their hands on your yarn? How can they find you?
Yeah, so this year we actually got a really busy schedule coming up. So it's a tactile sport. So you've got to touch our yarns. So we try to get to as many events as possible. So we're off to Fibre Feast in South Australia end of March. We're
possibly going to Port Fairy actually too.
Yeah, the Folkie.
The Folkies.
Possibly having a stand there.
The Port Fairy Folk Festival.
Yes.
Yes.
She's Crafty.
She's Crafty.
Back in Brunswick.
Thornbury. Yes, in Thornbury.
Thornbury.
Sorry, that's my neck of the woods. So yay!
So that's middle of April.
Then we've got Coburg Town Hall in May.
Yes.
Then we've got Bendigo Sheep and Wool Show.
Of course.
And
I think She's Crafty's doing another
one in Castlemaine later in the year.
October, I think that is.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be doing some pop-ups in Thornbury.
Yeah, so we've got access to
the in-between times.
Yeah, a shop in High Street there that we're going to start looking at doing a few more pop-ups.
My sister-in-law has a business.
She's got a Pinot and Picasso studio there.
Ah, yes.
So when they're not using that, we're thinking we might go down and set up some yarns down there for people to come and touch and feel and play with. So
could we have a knit along there as well?
Oh, exactly.
That would be really fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could do a Purl Code one.
Oh.
Opportunities.
We'll definitely chat about that. I reckon that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And online as well, right?
Yes.
So if you know the yarn already.
And every Saturday we're actually opening this space for people to come and touch and feel here in Delacombe at the moment. And unfortunately we can't do mill tours because of the location, but at least you can come and have a cuddle of the yarns and that sort of stuff. So yeah.
And they are very cuddle worthy. You can trust me on that.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much again, and we'll look forward to seeing you up in Melbourne soon.
Thank you, and thank you for visiting and listening to our story.
Yeah, awesome.
It's great. Thank you.
And we are back in my lounge room.
And I'm just beaming because I had so much fun. Nick and Isabel are just so down to earth, easy to talk to. They have an incredible market schedule as well.
Yeah.
I actually forgot to ask if they were going to go back to that one in Tasmania, which I think is after Bendigo. Anyway.
There are, off air we were talking about some other things that they've got coming up. So I think there's lots of opportunities if you are in Australia to keep an eye out for them. They're very active on social media as well, which is really helpful in terms of trying to get an opportunity to see the yarn for yourself. But certainly if you're in Victoria, there's loads of opportunities over the next 12 months by the looks of things.
Because if you just feel this yarn, it's just incredible to touch. I know I said that during the interview. I think that I wish people could actually just feel it.
Yeah.
And those Purl Code sweaters.
Yes. So they are
We had them
beautifully
on.
textured. Yeah, we took photos, which we'll probably put on the screen right now, of us in a couple of Purl Code sample sweaters that Isabell had knit up based on Isabell Kraemer's design, and they're lovely. They're really lovely.
Incredible. And that pattern's been favorited on Ravelry over 16,000 times.
Yeah, which is enormous. It's amazing for a small Australian. I mean, it's literally a husband and wife team. It's a very small Australian brand, and yet someone of Isabell Kraemer's status in the knitting design world has loved the yarn so much that she's done this incredible sweater. And I didn't know this about the Purl Code beforehand, but obviously there's that lovely thing where you can actually incorporate your own story into the Purl Code sweater. So
that's really fun though, because then you have really a unique, really meaningful garment.
yep, absolutely.
Mm.
So watch this space. We might have a little bit more to do with the Purl Code sweater coming up. We can't say too much at the moment, but
yeah, and I started knitting with Libella. It's
yes,
made out of
yeah.
Libella.
Yeah.
It's I guess kind of a 8-ply 10-ply for Purl Code.
for Purl Code, yeah.
I started knitting. I did start another whip. I won't talk about it much now, but it uses Libella 10-ply Aran weight, and it was just absolutely a dream to knit. And I made a mistake, and I had to rip back like 10 rows of the brand new sweater, which is fine, but even ripping it out was like quite easy, and I got just how the structure of the stitches, like it was just a dream to work with.
It kept its shape
Yes.
quite well. So
Yes.
when she had to do the rethread,
Yeah.
yeah,
Really easy.
it maintained structure.
So of course, because I liked it so much, I had to get a bit more today. Anyway, here's my little bag. Please that.
It's a very cute project bag as well, I have to say. I was a little bit jelly when he handed you the bag. I was like, I should buy some yarn too.
To get the bag.
I will buy some yarn. I just couldn't decide on colours and what pattern I wanted to use today. So
All right, so
Safety.
here it is. More Libella. This is their 8-ply. That's a natural color. And then I love this green that they've got. And I bought these skeins to make, in particular, the Pressed Flowers shawl by Amy Christoffers. And I'm gonna do the base color, or the main color, I think in the green, with white as the flowers.
that'll be beautiful.
It will be beautiful, and it's just, how soft is this?
Very soft.
I just want to cuddle it.
Very soft.
Like,
I mean, you can tonight.
can I make some pillowcases out of it, maybe? Anyway, sorry, that probably was a bit over the top. Surprise, surprise, coming from me. Anyway,
Well, I think we can probably wrap it up there.
Yeah,
We've
gonna have some
just made some peppermint tea inspired by Isabell.
Yeah.
And we just want to thank you very much for joining us again.
or for finding us and
for finding us.
and tuning in.
Absolutely.
If this is your first episode,
If you like this episode, please remember to give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to our channel. And also we love comments as well. So please, why not comment what you would write into your Purl Code sweater
yeah,
if you decided to make one.
a special
That's a
message.
cute idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. We're also on Instagram, so at Purlfect Pairings, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Until then, happy knitting.